Fine. So now we're going to start with a continuation of Cham. Okay, we're going to continue with Cham. Siman Tzadik Beis Yisoidus Gedolim. Some of the Yonah we already discussed in Chedesh Elul, and we'll repeat a little bit of that as much as necessary, and we'll continue. So the first sif is basically based on the Gemara. Kazayis Basar Shnofel Atech Yeda Shal Cholov. Kazayis Basar fell into very hot milk. So we already learned in Siman Tzadik Aleph Siv Dalet that if the bottom one is hot, you need shishim. Hakol osir. Keloimar imein by shishim. But if you have shishim, hakol mutter. For the first time now, the Mechaber didn't go into telling you how it becomes mutter. In Siman Tzadik Aleph, all it said is how it's osir. Milk basar falls into hot milk. It's osir. Okay, how is it mutter? So finally, he's telling us how it's mutter. So we know shishim, but in truth, you don't need shishim. You could ask a goy to taste it, and you could trust a goy. What kind of goy? Does the goy allow to know that you're trusting him? Mesiach lefi tumah, all that we're going to learn in Siman Tzadik Ches in Ilchus Taruvus. We're going to go through all the shittas and the svaras of what type of goy you're allowed to rely on. But here he's giving you the basic gist that ti'imas goy works, and the Ramah says we're not soymech bezman hazeh on ti'imas goy. There is the idea that someone a taina, but ti'imas Yisrael you could be soymech. So all you need to do is ask a Sfardi, make me fever. Ask a goy to taste it, then you eat it, and you tell me that there's no tam, and now I can trust a yid, and now I can eat it. There's such a sword, such an idea in halacha about making azar shtickle, azar spitzel, to be able to eat the food. But a kitzer, you could have tima. So basically, basar into cholov is tima. But however, the Gemara gives us a very interesting nekudah in Daf Kuf Ches, which we learned already for those who learned chulin, that there's a hidden thing happening here, if you remember. Some cholov goes into the basar, becomes nevela, because we say chtichan asas nevela by Basar Bechalav for sure, and it makes a U-turn and goes back into the cholov. So it's a problem for two shittas. If you hold min b'mino is never bottle, what's going to happen now? That little bit of cholov became nevela, went into the other cholov, and it's min b'mino and is never going to be bottle, and all your milk is going to be osir. And even if you hold like us that min b'mino is bottle, but min b'mino certainly you can't ask a goy to taste it, right? Because what's the goy going to taste? It tastes the same. So what do you do by min b'mino? You have to have shishim. So why are you relying on a goy? Maybe the milk went in, and the milk made a U-turn and came back, and now you have, in addition to the basar giving tam to the cholov, you have cholov going into cholov. For that, you need shishim. The shorter answer is such a good question that en hochanami. If you hold min b'mina loy bottle and the cholov made a U-turn, it's all treif. If you hold min b'mina is bottle, but you normally rely on a goy, here, you cannot rely on a goy. Because if it made the U-turn, you cannot rely on a goy. Now, how do you know when it makes the U-turn? The Gemara tells us, calls man, it's bubbling. Ma'at l'reticha over here, it doesn't mean hot. When it's boil here means bubbling. When it's bubbling, whatever goes in doesn't come out. The chaticha itself gives tam. You always need shishim or te'ima against the basar. But whatever goes into the basar, there's no U-turn, calls man it's bubbling. So if you chapta took the piece out before it stopped bubbling, and the mechaber, based on the Rishonim, the Rambam holds, you could ask a goy. But if you didn't chap it in time, you can't ask a goy. You have to have shishim. For us, it doesn't make any difference because we're not saying mechan a goy anyways. This is the basic gist of Sif Aleph. Now, Agav, the Pri Megadim says, what about the basar? Why is the basar osir? Why can't you ask a goy to taste the basar? So Pri Megadim says, because even if a goy tells you there's no time at the basar, vaday shakurim mishakir. It's for sure lying. What do you mean? If a piece of basar falls into this huge pot of boiling hot milk, it for sure gave time to the basar. It for sure tastes like basar b'cholov. Okay. That's point number one. Point number two, the Pri Megadim asks a number of questions on this din. If we're assuming that the basar gives tam, in addition to the basar, if you left it till it stopped bubbling, what else is giving tam? The kazayis cholav is coming out and giving tam. How many times shishim should you require here? How many kazaysim? Let's say the basar has a kazayis. How many kazaysim of treif fell into your pot now? 2. The basar is treif, klap at the cholov, and the cholov is treif, klap at the cholov. So it's like 2 kazaysim fell in. A kazayis of basar and a kazayis of cholov that became treif, fell into a pot of milk. What do you need? 120. So why you only need 60? It's a brilliant question. Even if you're going to come up with an answer, right? One thing's for sure. One of the kazaysim of cholov you can't use to be mevatel the basar, because one of the kazaysim is treif. So you should at least need how many kazaysim of cholov? Instead of 2, at least what should you need? 61. Right? Because one of those kazaysim shouldn't help you because it became treif. Also a very good question. Okay? All these questions we're going to leave on the side for now. We have a similar clear din in Siman Tzadik Dalad with spoons. Okay? And there, the whole sugi is going to come up, and we're going to discuss it, and then we'll try to show you. You remember we asked the question in Tzadik Beis? This is going to be the same answer. The Pri Megadim answers it here, but I don't want to waste your time now on this, because you'll forget it by the time we get to Tzadik Daled, where that's going to be the Iker Sugya that's going to answer this question. But the question, Sim Bachram asked the question, is a brilliant question. Pri Megadim right away asked. Pri Chodosh asked the question, Pri Megadim asked the question. It's a huge question. Something's fishy here. You only need Shishim against the Basar, but we're assuming if you didn't take it out right away, that you actually have two kazaisim of problem. The kazayis of Basar, plus a serious kazayis of Cholav that became treif. All right, Beseder Gamur. Siv Beis. Siv Beis is the Mishnah. Tipas Cholav, it doesn't say Tippa here, it says Cholav fell onto a piece of Basar. Says the Rambam, Toye min achaticha. Taste that chaticha. For us, the Rambam says, what does that mean? The Rashi writes it also in the Mishnah. It's not tasting the chaticha, just make sure the chaticha has shishim against the Cholav. If it has shishim against the Cholav, mutter. If it doesn't have shishim against the Cholav, what's the din of the piece? Pieces treif. Right away, we have two major problems. Let's start with problem number one, and then problem number two, and then we'll go to the additional problems till we finish the shir. Problem number one is, since when is one piece being mekabel tam? We discussed already way back that there's an idea of zap, there's an idea of derech hiluchay. Isra falls onto a tafshil. Where does it end up? If it's roitiv, where does it end up? If it's no roitiv, where does it end up? Kederetila, right? If it's Isra Machmasatzmoi. If it's Isra Balua, it doesn't ask it at all. But if it's Reitiv, where does it end up? On the bottom. Why are we isolating one piece? The answer is, again, it's such a good kasha that Enoch Enami. This piece is not in the Reitiv. That's the answer. Tosfos says right away on the Mishnah, on Tipas Cholov, the piece is not in the Reitiv. How much out of the Reitiv is it? That's already a Machloikis Rashi and D, right? It has to be completely out of the Reitiv, a little bit out of the Reitiv. We'll get to that in the next phase of the Shiur. But number one, this is a simple teretz. It's not in the roitiv. The piece is out of the roitiv. That's why the cholov fell on one piece. That we're being done as if that's the whole problem. Only that piece. Problem number two, hey, if it's out of the roitiv, how far is it supposed to go in that piece? Only kedei netila. So why are we assuming it goes to the bottom of the piece? That's problem number two. Once we resolve problem number one, the piece is out of the roitiv. Now I have a new kasha. There's a din below roitiv, and the isur is kochush. It's lean. It only goes kedei netila. We discussed that already in Siman Tzaddik Aleph. So farvai, do we say over here that it goes into the whole piece? So the shach brings two basic terutzim. One teretz says, again, the kasha is so strong it must be shamein. What's shamein? Or cholav is shamein, or the basar is shamein. Has to be, or else how far would the cholav go? Only kedei netila. Mind you, when we say the cholav is shaman, it's not really shaman. Because if it was really shaman, how far would it go? It would also go out of the piece and continue to the bottom. So you have to assume it's shamanish, enough shaman to go into one chaticha and not further. But it's two options of shaman. The shach makes like two different terutzim. But really it's one teretz. The kasha is brilliant, it's a gevaldik kasha, itaki can't go more to kedei netila. The reason why he does is because it's shaman. Then he brings Aran. That if you have food under the walls of a pot, meaning it's not sticking out on top of the pot, it's under the walls of the pot, there's hevel v'lachluchis akdeira that creates an intense amount of steam, and that's like roitiv. That means, not it's like roitiv, it makes a tipas cholov have the din of roitiv. Only a liquid. If a gush fell onto a gush, a salad fell onto a salad, even in a pot, it's going to be kedei netila. But if it's a liquid, even if it's a drop, which normally does not have a din roitiv, if it's under the walls of a pot, mitoich, the Ran asks the kasha, for those who learned it in Elul, Mamish, the first point of the Ran on the Mishnah, it's the first kasha he asks. What are you talking about? Why does it go into the whole chaticha? He answers, because there's hevel v'lachluchas akteira, it goes into the whole piece. Again, it's not really roitiv, because if it would have a din of real roitiv, how far would the tipas cholov go? To the bottom. So it's quasi roitiv. Quasi, a little bit, enough roitiv to get into the full piece. So those are the two terutzim that the shach brings, and the taz really. Teretz number one is poshet shamein. By shamein we know it goes bekulah, like we discussed in Tzaddik Aleph. Option number two is no. Here there's a different din. Hevel v'lachluchis hakdero is like roitiv. The shach finishes, I really wasted a lot of your time, he says. Because for us, Ashkenazim, this is not a kasha anyways. Because we're not baki ben kochosh l'shamein, right? So no matter what, this tipas cholov is going to go to the bottom of the chaticha. Simple. It's my whole pilpul was for the mechaber. The mechaber is a stira. Here he writes it goes into the whole chaticha. The Mishnah says it goes into the whole chaticha. What about the mechaber's shitta and the Mishnah's shitta? That below roitiv it only goes kedei netila. So I answered you. But for us, we're not baki anyways. We're a bunch of idiots. Huh?
Then it should keep going.
What do you mean? Excellent question. You're going to keep that on hold until Taruvis. Till Taruvis. Really, someone at time that's the Bekiva Egis Chiddush, number Gimel. Yeah. It's Ken Zayin, that's the Bekiva Egis Chiddush, number Gimel. Excellent question.
The Taz gives the second answer of the Gan clearly?
Yeah, that's what he means. When he says it's soul, he means how a chulkas like data l'daiti.
Why does he say that?
Azay zogich, azay help.
Why does he take so?
Marshal tiditz the hocha meide be isur soul, b'shom meide be isur av. What he means to say is together with how a chulkas like data.
No, not that. It's just the second half of the answer of V'yesh lema in the Shach.
I understand. It goes together. The Shach is saying it's one teretz. Shach is learning. Have a
He agrees with the first half.
I heard you, and I'm telling you I disagree. I think that's what he means.
He obviously agrees with the first half because he brings it all the way in Hay, in Tzadik Aleph Hay.
He brings Hevel Achluchas.
He says that you need solid. He says in Hay that it's not considered liquid, but that Basar Bechalav wouldn't be liquid.
He says that.
He says this is only by Basar Bechalav. Shayushim who need liquid. He's talking about Chalav. No, Chalav is liquid.
That was a kasha that we had.
And the Chaviz Das says he must be with the Gan.
Fine. So clearly that's what he means here.
Yeah.
Fine. So he's putting them together, L'daiti. Anyways, Nachs in Yonenu. So the Shach says that I wasted your time because Be'emes we're not Boki anyways, Mekochosh L'shom, and that's why Ketzarti. This is called a Kitzer, by the way. This whole Shach is a Kitzer. The Kiva Egem makes an interesting Ha'ora. Stam. I'm only telling it to you, although it's a Davar HaPoshet, because I want to drill this in. We discussed it already, and I'm going to repeat it. Whenever we say that Amor holds Einon Abeki and Mekochosh L'shamin, it sounds like it's so terrible, right? That means how far does the Yisr go? Because maybe it's Shamin until the bottom. So therefore everything will be what? Osir. And you would require Shishim to be matir. But even if you have Shishim, you still need to take off the Natila. Because maybe it wasn't Shamin and it was only Kochosh, and the Shishim didn't help for the Natila. Does that make sense? We said that already, right? Says Rabbi Kiva Eger, hello, you need to know which teretz is emes over here. If you hold of the Ran's teretz, how far does it really go? Kulei. So if you have Shishim, what's going to be mutter? Everything. If you go with the teretz of Einon Abeki and Mekochosh L'shomin, what are you going to require? Shishim plus the tila. So why does the Shach say, it doesn't matter to us, I wasted your time, it was just for the Mechaber? Because we anyways hold Einon Abeki. Oh, it matters. Because if the Ran is right, you're not going to need Netila. Look at the Bekiva Eger, first column on page Kuf Yud Ches, 3 lines from the bottom of the first column. Vadai and Nafkimina Ladina, you see? You see that? The Mitam ain't on the Bekim, but in on Gamke, Netila Smokim. Netila. Ilu Hocha, because of Hevel Velachluchis, Bedina the Tipaschol, the Bediika Shishim Beisachadira, ain't Sodak Netila Smokim. Why not? Because if you hold like the Ran, you don't need Netila. Sure. That's what he answers. That's what he says. Ha'ara on the Shach. Okay. Now, where is this chaticha? We know for sure we decided to answer the question, the first question, where's the chaticha? It's out of the reitiv. How much out of the reitiv? Huge machloikis Rashi Tosfos. Ri and Rashi they call it, but it's Rashi Tosfos. The Ri says out means completely out, which means you have another piece that's halfway out, and this piece that the Tipas Chola fell on, where is it? On top of that piece. Because if the piece would have been a little bit in the reitiv, come on, that's part of the tafshil. That goes everywhere. That's what the Tosfos holds. He brings B'Shem Rashi, which there is no such Rashi, the B'S Yosef Muchasich, where the Tosfos make it up, but they were cousins, they knew what Rashi held. I mean, you could trust Tosfos when he says what Rashi held. Einiklach, cousins, uncles, I don't know, they're all one big happy family over there. So Rashi held, no. Even if it's sticking out a little bit from the reitiv, that's like chutz l'reitiv. And that piece is isolated, and that chaticha is different than the rest of the tafshil. Even if it's just miktzah, so b'teicharet. Beautiful. Pashtus. There's another Gemara in Daf Kuf Ches Amud Beis, which you all learned. And we discussed it in the Shiurim in El, and I'm going to repeat it. The Gemara says the following. Kivan shenosan tam b'chaticha. Once the Cholav gave the chaticha tam, we discussed arichas, the following, but I'm not going to go into that again. Chaticha atzma nasis nevela, the piece becomes nevela. And according to the Yehuda and Rav, that they hold min b'mino is never bottle, this top piece asers all the pieces, mipnei shehei mino. Correct? Mm-hmm. Asers all the pieces, mipnei shehei mino. Okay. Fred the Gemara, how is it asking all the pieces? This piece is out of the reitiv. What's coming out of the chaticha?
Meat.
Only meat. Cholav is not coming out. Why?
No reitiv.
Because there's no reitiv. This is what we know. The Gemara says so. You didn't push it in the reitiv. Mivla bola. We discussed it in El. This piece is belei acholov. Miflat loy polit. It's not giving out any milk. This is how we know it. This is Eliyahu Navi Zachar Latayv. The Marai says is how we know that a balua doesn't come out below reitiv. This is one of the ways. So how does it aser? Gemara says you're right. You pushed it afterwards in the reitiv. But if you did nothing, right, the cholov is not coming out and it doesn't aser. If you remember, we learned lahalocha l'mais. It's a huge machlokes, Raivet and Deran. The Raivet Taka learns like that. There's a piece of basar that was belei cholov, beloy reitiv. You put it on this table. What's the table going to become? Fleishik. Not going to become treif, because what's not coming out of the basar? Cholov. And cholov is not coming out. The basar is not osar. This is in sync with the klal. Remember what the klal is? Anytime you say chtichan asis nevela, in order for it to aser, ein haneser oiser elo. Remember? The mokim she'isar atzma yochalelich. The only time you say chaticha nasis nevela is if the oiser, the thing that's in there, is also continuing. Because the obvious question is, who cares if the balua doesn't come out? Don't we say chaticha nasis nevela b'shari tzudin, or at least basar bechalav? So the basar became nevela. Who cares if the chalav is not going out? Answer: not true. Nevela doesn't work if the oiser is not there with it. The dugma I brought was a plug in a machine. When you plug in a machine, what does the power do? Makes the machine have a saw, cuts wood. Pull out the plug, there's no machine. It doesn't work. So the only way the machine works as a saw is only if it has juice. No juice, doesn't work. The juice is the oiser. So the only way you're going to say chaticha nasis nevela is if it's in reitiv. Then the oiser is also coming out. The Ran says, Babi Maisis. The Ran says not true. Once something becomes nevela, I don't care anymore. Basically, if you take a piece of basar that has cholov and you remove all the cholov, you can't do that. Because we discussed kama pa'amim le'motzinu hagola ba'ichlin. You can't kasher food. But let's say you can go to a lab and get out all the cholov. What's going to be the din? The first shitta will say, stake kosher. The second shitta will say, no, it stays treif. Because once it became nevela, it became nevela. The Gemara seems to say that if out mixing it, it doesn't aser. Anyone remember what the Ran says? It was just a havamina. It's not true. It was a havamina of the Gemara, not the maskana. That's what the Ran answers. So you have a huge machlokes Ran and Raivet. If by basar b'cholov, if you don't have cholov coming out, is the basar still osir? The Ran says yes. The Raivet says no. Okay. In halacha l'maisa, by shari surim, we all agree to the Raivet. Halacha l'maisa, not like the Ran. That if you have chaticha nasis nevela, which the mechaber doesn't hold of anyways, but we, Rabbeinu Tam and Ashkenazim, who do hold of chaticha nasis nevela b'shari surim, it's only if the oiser is going. We discussed it in Tzadik Aleph 2. So if you have a piece of basar that was belei nevela, and you put it on this table below reitiv boiling hot, the table is only fleishik, it's not treif. Basar b'cholov, the machloikis shach and taz, clear. Everyone turn to Taz Zayin, page Kuf Chavov. It goes behemshich to our case. You take a piece of basar that was belei cholov, says the mechaber, and you cook it again. Here's where the mechaber says you need shishim against the whole piece. Says the Taz right away. I'm going to learn a few words. Avo beloy bishul. You didn't put it into liquid. What's the next words of the Taz? Eino oiseres. Period. It doesn't aser. Afilu shneim chamin. Because the Taz holds like the Raivet. The Raivet quotes, the Taz quotes it in Hey, but inon sheyetze min hacholov. You need the cholov tam to come out. And beloy reitiv, the balua does not come out, so it doesn't aser. However, the Shach argues, not here, be'ikir, mainly in Siman Kufay of Cotton Yud Zayin, huge Shach, okay? And he holds like the Ran by Basar Bechalav, that once the Basar becomes Asr, we learn the whole Shiur in Chedesh El, and we mentioned then the Shach Asers, and I'll show it to you in the Shach. It's also Zayin, by the way. Go to page Kuf Chav Beis. Small little Shach. On the Ramo. The Ramo says that the piece, only the piece is Asr because it's out of the Reitiv. Let's assume for a second. Ayin lekamon simikul face of Zayin sivkot and Yud Zayin de mikol mokim shara chatichos shenogu bezu achatichot tzrichim netilo. Because even though the cholab is not coming out, it asks. One might ask, so we're not baki ben kochash l'shomen, why only netila? That's a conversation. This is one of the places that we're baki ben kochash l'shomen. There's like 10 places we're baki. This is one of them. The Taz will say, you do not need netila. Now, when I learned Basar Bechalav, nobody told me this because I didn't learn Tarubis yet. And I had a test and it asked, do you need Natila? I didn't know the answer. It's a Machloikis Shach and Taz. I answered yes. It's a crazy Shach, before the Shach, right? But it was wrong. The answer is it's a Machloikis Shach and Taz. Once I learned Tarubis later, I learned it wrong in Basar Bechalav. So I'm saving you that heartache. I'm telling you now that it's a Machloikis Shach and Taz, the same machlokes Ran and Ravid. Okay, now, let's take a step back for a second.
But according to the Ravid, he says you're going to need more than the Tila.
Nothing. The Cholav doesn't come out, you need nothing.
I'm sorry, according to the other one.
The Ran,
yeah,
he Grada says more, but we hold only Kedin Tila. Okay. Now let's take a step back for a moment. So what happens over here now? Let's go with Tosfos, or everybody agrees. Everybody agrees that if it's out of the Reitiv completely, even Tosfos, that piece is separate. What's going to happen? Tipas Cholov that falls on a Chatiche, and there's no Shishim in the Chatiche, what do? Paskin to be the din. My Rabbi say. Huh? What do? Treif. What do? Throw it out. Tell the person on the phone, don't push it in the Reitiv. L'man Hashem. Because if you push it in the Reitiv, automatically what are you going to need now? Shishim in your whole tafshil against? The whole Chaticha, because it became the throw it out. Rabbi, but it touched a piece. It was sitting on a piece. What do I need to do to that piece? So you ask like this, do you like the Taz or do you like the Shach, right? If you like the Taz, it's also okay, because the Cholov didn't come out and it's okay. If you like the Shach, we'll tell you, okay, so don't do the Tila on the bottom piece. But the rest of the tafshil is going to be completely what? Mut kosher. All right. Let's start. What if it's Miktsasa b'toich hareitif? So if you're the Ri, and you like the Ri, you like Tosfos, what's going to be the halacha? You need, what treif? The Cholov goes where? Everywhere. So it's a good chance that everything's going to be kosher, right? So therefore, if you have Shishim against the Cholov, everything is mutter, including that Chaticha. Okay. If you're Rashi, you're a grandchild of Rashi, Tosfos was too, by the way, but you're from the other side, you're not from the Tosfos side, you're a different Einikov from Rashi, you want to paskin like Rashi. So what's going to be the halacha now? What are you going to say? Oh, what are you going to say? Right, we're getting there. What are we going to say? That chaticha needs shishim. If that chaticha does not have shishim, what's going to be the din? Just that piece is aser. What about the rest of the pot? I didn't do any niur, but it's sitting halfway in the reitiv. So the Darkei Moshe says, I'm not sure. Darkei Moshe says, what is Rashi actually going to hold when it's sitting inside the reitiv halfway? Do I need to mix it in order for it to continue asering the rest of the pot? Or not? Darkei Moshe finishes, I found out. I had a suffix, but now I don't have a suffix anymore. It does not answer the rest of the pot. The Gemara Meforeshes. The Gemara says if you don't mix it, it doesn't answer. And according to Rashi, where is this piece? It's also including a case where it's a little bit in the reitiv. So if you don't mix it, not a problem. Doesn't make any sense to me. Because even if you're going to convince me that Cholov doesn't come out, because it's halfway out of the reitiv, but Basar it's for sure giving, and if you're the Shach, and the Ran, what do they hold that Basar has the koyach to aser? So I don't know how that works, okay? With the Shach. How's the Shach going to work? But it's okay because he passes like Diri anyway, so nobody cares. But in Svara, it's a kash. But that's what the Darkei Moshe holds. Correct? So now I have a question for you. What happens if a tipas chola falls on a chaticha that's halfway in the reitiv, and there isn't even shishim in the whole pot against the cholov? What's the din? There isn't even shishim in the whole pot against the cholov. Certainly not in that piece. What would the shach say? What's aser? What would the Di say? What's aser? It's aser b'tei chareitiv? Everything. Rashi would say? Only the piece. So Rashi sounds like he's a big chumrah, right? There's also a kula. The kula is, if there's no shishim against the cholav also in the whole pot, Rashi is really machmir. Oh my God, the whole piece becomes the vela, right? According to the Ri, everything is mitzvah after shishim. Yeah. If you have shishim against the cholav. What if you don't have shishim against the cholav? Then the Ri is, oh my gosh, the whole pot is treif. Rashi says, hold your horses, only the piece is treif. Because this piece is separate. As says up to Darkei Moshe, if he did nothing, the piece doesn't go further. So the rest of the pot is going to be kosher. That's the Darkei Moshe paskins, that there is a tzad kula l'Rashi. That's the kula. The kula is if there's no shishim even against the cholav, Rashi will say the rest of the pot is mutter. The Taz says this makes absolutely zero sense. How can you say that a piece that's 50% or a little bit in the reitiv, yeah? Rashi might say that because it's sticking out, so the piece is separate for a moment, like dovuk. Remember we learned dovuk? What does dovuk do? There's no zap. It first asers that piece, but a second later you need shishim in the rest of the pot against that whole piece. That's exactly what Ada the Reitiv does, according to Rashi. There's no zap, there's no derech hiluchay. The cholov falls on the chaticha, so it first, for a moment, gives time to this chaticha, made this chaticha, and automatically now you need shishim in the rest of the pot against this piece. Says the Taz, that's what Rashi holds. Rashi's a machmir, ala machmir. Not only is he machmir that the piece is independent when it's sticking out of the reitiv, it's halfway in the reitiv. Not only that, you automatically will need shishim against the whole chaticha. I don't like the Darkei Moshe. I think you're off mark, off target. And the Fedish, you need shishim against the whole chaticha in such a case. This is what the Taz paskins in Rashi. What's he going to do with the Gemara? The Gemara says you need to mix it. Like the Ran, it's a half a minute. Although the Taz doesn't hold like the Ran lahalocha concerning Cholov not coming out. He happens to pass like the Ravid, that if Cholov doesn't come out, it doesn't aser. But Pshat in the Gemara, it's ironic. Pshat in the Gemara, he anyways has to learn like the Ran. Because the Gemara says you have to mix, and the Taz is claiming in Rashi, when he passes act like Rashi, that you don't have to mix. So, Beseder, it's not a problem. Pshat in the Gemara, he learns like the Ran, lahalocha, he passes grada like the Ravid, that when there's no reitiv, the Cholov doesn't come out, and therefore it doesn't aser. The Shach is backwards. The Shach, we're going to see soon, learns like the Darkei Moshe, that if you didn't touch it according to Rashi, it doesn't aser. He should have held like the Taz, because the Shach holds, I don't need the Cholov to come out, because he holds like the Ran. So why would the Shach say it's all mutter? I mentioned before, we don't care, because the Shach lahalocha paskins like the Ri anyways, so it doesn't matter. He's anyways going to say everything is mitzdaref. But in Seichel, he should have held like the Taz.
Why can't you simply say that there's going to be a machlokes, rather than meat, just because it's taking in, the chavistas, just because it's taking in doesn't mean that's not also giving out of the milk. So you can have the meat, the milk still goes to the meat, but it's taking in the issur. So if you see that part in the chavistas, you can say that that's how...
That's when it's bubbling. The chavistas is talking to the guy bubbling.
Yeah.
I understand, but that's
when
only...
it's sucking in, it's still giving out milk. It's not giving out the asur milk. It's not giving out the Basar Bechalav milk. It's only giving out milk.
What does that mean?
What it means is if there's chatiras basar on top of a whole pot of basar, the milk is going all the way through.
Who said? No, it's not.
Chavistas.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, he does.
If you hold like Ri, not like Rashi. He says it in Ri, not in Rashi.
They,
Not in Rashi.
that's fine.
We're talking about Rashi here.
Yeah, but the svar is applied to...
No. No. We'll talk about it soon. You're confusing two dinim over here.
Okay.
You're confusing Ri when it's bubbling. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about Rashi when it's not bubbling. You're fusing two inyanim. Completely not connected. We'll get to that.
Why can't he answer that the Gemara says that you need near, that like B'etzem near would work, but since we're not sure if people are going to do a proper job, that's why.
But because the Gemara says if he did nothing, it doesn't answer. That's what the Gemara paskins. Sounds like it. So you have to answer. It's not kipshute. Okay, let's go back there. Now the Taz says something very weird and interesting. He says, I know I'm right. And I know the halachas like Rashi, and not just the halachas like Rashi, I know my pshat in Rashi is correct. He says, let's see the Rambam. Look at the Rambam, the Mechaber. Let's see the Mechaber. Page Kufchav. V'im yesh b'chaticha, the third line. Miti'im as cholov. If the chaticha has tam of cholov, nesra oisa chaticha. The chaticha is also, skip the parentheses. Umesharim bekula. And automatically you need shishim in the rest of the pot against the basar. Slow down. Automatically you need shishim in the rest of the pot against the basar. Don't you need nir? There's only one one case that it would automatically aser the rest of the pot without doing nir. What's that case? Rashi and me. It's the only case. And I'm right in Rashi. Now I know that the Rambam holds like Rashi and the Mechaber also holds like Rashi. That's what the Taz says. Everybody attacks the Taz. When you didn't see the next words, skip 3 lines. When did I say you need shishim? If you mixed it. If you didn't mix it, no problem. No, he didn't say if you didn't mix it. If you mixed it right away, everything is mutter. But it's mashma that if you didn't mix it, what did the Rambam say? When do I say you need shishim if you mixed it in the end? But if you mixed it right away, it's mutter. What if you didn't mix it at all? What's mashma? Mutter. No, only that piece is usher. Just that piece. So it was a Taz like. Now, if you take a regular Rambam, it's actually a different halacha. The Medvorim starts another halacha. So where the Taz had a delete, he didn't have that halacha, which something doesn't make any sense. Everybody has the Kudas HaKesef right away attacks the Taz. Like, what are you talking about? The piece could be added the Reitav also, like the Ri. This doesn't even mean Rashi. Obviously, it says you mixed it. So the Taz like missed the boat here. So we'll try to answer it soon. Okay? But this is what's going on here. Now, let's continue the Ramah. The Ramah says, what about if you didn't do anything? Similar to what we just spoke, but we'll see. It's going to get complicated. Which the Mechaber never mentioned. Mechaber says if you mixed it at the end, it's osir. You mix it right away, it's mutter. What if you mix it at all? Mechaber doesn't say, right? Says the Ramah, I'll tell you. You did exactly what the rabbi told you. Stop. Throw it out. Don't touch it. Don't put it in the reitiv, right? Says the Ramah, if the pot has 60 against the cholov, just the pieces also. All right, this makes absolutely zero sense. Where is the piece? Let's try all options. Where is the piece? Let's try from the easiest case. Kula chutz l'reitiv. Which part of the Ramah doesn't make sense? If that's the case, why do you need shishim against the cholov? You should need nothing, just that piece. At most, you would need on the one right under it. The shach says he holds like the ran. Even though the cholov doesn't come out, you would need what on the bottom piece? The tila. That's what he says. The one that touches that piece. But shishim in the pot against the cholov? No way. No such thing. Right? Why would you do that? Some say this Ramah makes absolutely so much no sense that you have to taka change the girsa in the Ramah. Itaka means out of the roitiv, and it means instead of yes shishim, ain't shishim. The Ber Agoyla says so, and the Gro says so. The Gro changes the girsa. This Ramah. That's what he means. He's telling you, mamish the case. It's out of the roitiv. You did nothing, even if there's no shishim against the cholov. Only the chaticha is also very, very balabatish. Look at the Be'er HaGoyla says, Lulei de mistafina, Iloi de mistafina, Mina la nias daiti, Shenofal Tos. The Gros says it also, Tos soiferu, V'tzorech liyis v'chein klal, im ein shishim b'chaticha. Nobody else likes this. Because such a big mistake between ein and yesh, that's like dark and day, night and day, you know? It's not like a little mistake. All right, so it can't be the pieces out of the native. Because the way it says it here, it's impossible. Nobody holds you need shishim in the pot against the cholov if it's out of the roitiv. Okay, so where's the piece? In the roitiv. If you're deri, what's the problem? The piece itself should be mutter. Very good. There's no reason that the piece should be also. So he can't be holding like deri. Very good. You're asking a good question. It can't be that he holds like deri and it's mitzvah b'teicha, because if he held like deri, the piece would also be mutter, right? Okay, so he holds like Rashi. Well, which Rashi? If he's the Darkei Moshe Rashi, what would be the din? The rest of the pot would still not need shishim neged the cholov. You remember, Rashi has a kula that if it's mikzosa b'teicha roitiv, the rest of the pot doesn't even need shishim neged the cholov. Just the pieces also. Here he says you do need shishim. That can't be. If you're the Tazin the Rashi, what would be the din here? Sorry. Not only is the pot also, you need shishim in the pot against the whole chatiche. Something makes no sense. This Ramah, no matter how you slice it, doesn't make any sense. Ri doesn't make sense. Rashi doesn't make sense according to the Darkei Moshe, because then you wouldn't even need shishim in the kedera against the cholov. And according to Taz and Rashi, it wouldn't make sense, because then you would need shishim against the whole chaticha. Fishy, right? Comes the shach and says, I have a simple explanation. The Darkei Moshe doesn't know who the halach is like Ri or Rashi. I don't know what to do. So he paskins very simple. If the halach is like Ri, what do I need? Shishim. In the whole pot against the tippah. But maybe the halacha is like Rashi, Darkei Moshe, which what's asur? Only the chaticha. So asur the chaticha. And according to Rashi, you don't even need shishim in the rest of the pot. So I take the chumris of both. Maybe halacha like Rashi, so asur at least the chaticha. And maybe halacha like me, at least require in the rest of the kedera shishim against. Simple as that. That's what the shach says. Shach holds like the Darkei Moshe Pshat in Rashi, that if he didn't do any near, the rest of the pot doesn't even need shishim. So it makes a lot of sense. He Poshit doesn't know the halacha, and since I don't know, you go to Chumrah.
But that wouldn't work according to Rashi, the more strict...
Correct. It's only the Darkei Moshe. This is the Darkei Moshe, same guy. The Ramah is Dr. Darkei Moshe. Now, the problem is that in Sif Dalid, it's a clear Ramah that he passes like Rashi, and you need shishim against the whole Chativa. Everyone turn to Sif Dalid, to page Kuf Lamed. Fourth line of the Ramah, Kol Zeh B'Shar Yisurim. You have it all. Talking about mitzvah, Kol Zeh B'Shar Yisurim. Al Basar Bechalav, Af Pishayini Yisur Dovak. That doesn't matter for us. Here's the next words matter. Umiktzah Zachaticha Toicha Roitiv Amrinon Chaticha Nasis Nevela. You need shishim against the whole chaticha. Hello. A minute ago you said you don't need shishim against the chaticha. You only need shishim against the cholav. Look at the shach. Third line of the wide lines, Venire. You have it in the same page. You all have it? Third line, Venire. Our din says, Loi nir, v'loi kisa klal, loi betchila, b'loi b'sayf. Here it's talking about nir. And the Shach actually proves it, by the way. Although it doesn't say it in the Ramah, he proves it from a raya later, that the Ramah must be talking about nir. Everything's beautiful. Since he's not sure, what happens if you taka mixed it afterwards? Since maybe halachic Rashi, what's going to be the din? What's going to be the din since maybe halachic Rashi? You didn't shishim against the whole chaticha. So Sif Dalet was talking about that you mixed it after. Sif Beis, you didn't mix it at all. Mamish, it's beautiful. However, the Taz is stuck. If Rashi's shit is emes according to him, this Ramah doesn't make any sense. Because the minute you hold like Rashi, what should be the halacha? You should require shishim in the kedera, not only against the cholov, but also against the whole piece. So he says, I have no choice, Taka. That I'm a paskins like Diri. That all you need is shishim against the cholov. So why is the piece also? Chumre looks bad, Tipas cholov falls on a piece. Let's ask it a piece. That's what the Taz says. Taz has no choice. He couldn't say that Amo wasn't sure, because the minute you're not sure, and Rashi, then you have to ask her, shishim against the whole chatika. So he came up with an answer. He really holds like Diri. The main problem is, if that's the case, in Sif Daled, who does he paskin like? Did Amo clearly like? Rashi. Stira. He doesn't answer. Look at the end of the Taz. Hey, V'su Kosher, the Besif Daled Mesayim Ramo, the Basar Bechalav, Yeshla Hachmir. V'kan Posak, Lohokyo, like Diri. Umayri, Basar Bechalav. Page Kuf Chav Beis.
Why can't the Taz say like the Shach?
Because he has a different opinion than Rashi.
Oh, he learns in the Chumrah.
He owes the Chumrah. So according to the Taz, he has to learn that it's Sif Beis, he's Pashat Paskin is like Ri, and he's only Machman on the Chatich, and Sif Daled, the Paskin is like Rashi. Problem. Taz writes it twice. He writes it here, and he also brings it again in Sifkot and Yud Daled. He writes Uleil Kasafti that it's a soiser. The one he writes is Sif Beis. Okay, that's it. So now you see clearly the background of why the Shach was able to get away with saying that the Ramo was Misapkele, and the Taz was not able to get away with saying Misapkele based on his opinion in Rashi. The only problem is that everybody asks on this Taz is, who are you explaining over here? Who's he explaining here? Who? The Ramo. We all know what the Ramo holds. Like, what's your problem? Why can't you learn like the Shach? Who wrote the Darkei Moshe? The Ramo. You argued with him. Okay, so say that. But why can't you explain the Ramo just like the Shach and say, I don't agree? Because it's a Darkei Moshe. It's not like you're learning a Ramo. Right? Like, we all know what the Darkei Moshe holds. The Taz himself brought what the Darkei Moshe holds and argues. So why are you turning into a pretzel because you can't explain the Ramo when we know what he holds? So the Prima Godim says, because the Taz claims that Ramo was Chayzer and held like him from Sif Daled. It doesn't say Nir over there. The Shach learned that it was Nir. But it doesn't say Nir over there. So the Taz says, you know what? I think that Ramo thought about it harder after he wrote the Darkei Moshe, and he agreed to me. Now I got a problem. Here it has to hold like Nir, and there he holds like Rashi. Prima Godim writes this. Look at the Prima Godim Hey. What? Yeah. Look at Hey. Look at Prima Godim Hey. Ein Taz. Kavanosim Mavur. Mishpat Zav Hey. Kavanosim Mavur. The Ozel Shitose, the Taz is going according to his opinion, Besif Beis, but is Beis. The Rashi Miksosa Toicharoite, Rashi Taz holds Af Shaloi Nir Klal, Nesra Tchila Achaticha, and then Achlakach automatically Oiseres Achedes. And Taz claims V'chein Posak Ramo Sif Dalit Behagod the Basar Bechalav Oiseres Shara Achatichas Af Shaloi Nir Klal, which I showed you in a Shach that claims that it is near, but the Taz learns Kipshuta it's not near. Kain Mashma Mistimas L'Shoinesham, that Ramo doesn't say near, the Shach just said it's near. V'chozar claims the Taz that the Ramo was choizer Himashekosa b'Darkei Moshe that Rashi Eino Yiseres below near. Ubemele the Taz had no choice to learn over here that he holds like the Ri. Ubemele he was ended up with a question. It's a stira to Sif Daled. The Shach takes care of it. Okay, so far so good. Now what's the halacha by the way? Ri or Rashi? So there's a few issues over here. The Taz paskins like Rashi, at least by Basar Bechalav. The Shach paskins like the Ri, completely. And the Ramo doesn't know. But the Shach passes like the Ri. The Alter Rebbe, actually, it's interesting. He's mashma that he holds like the Ri, but although he's machmer, like on Pesach, what would happen now? Pesach, if a tipas chometz falls on a chatiche, that's mikzosa b'toich hareitiv. If you're the Ri, how much does it aser? The whole thing, even if you have shishim, because chometz is not bottled, right? If you're Rashi and you're the Darkei Moshe, how much does it aser? Just that piece. The Alter Rebbe says it asers the whole thing. So you see, he holds like the Ri. Maybe he's just going the chumrah. Right? Maybe it's just going to chumrah. But I remember that I have a diuk from the Alter Rebbe. I just forgot to bring it or look it up. That the Alter Rebbe Takya holds like Diri.
Well, it makes sense. The Shach brings a bunch of opinions.
Yeah, I know. But so the Taz does whatever.
He only has like...
Okay. Let's talk about something else now. And then we'll go back. We still have 18 minutes. I want to finish with 1:30. The Mechaber, the Rambam says, when is it okay if you mixed it right away? What's the Lashon Rambam and the Mechaber? Mitchila ve'ad soif. Pashup shat. What does ad soif mean? Till it cools down. You got to mix for 20 minutes, half an hour, till it cools down. Who argues right away? The Torah. What are you talking about? I never heard of such a thing. Isser falls onto a tafshil, and there's shishim. It fell onto roitiv, or it's petecha roitiv. Everything is bottled. Like what are you saying? So you mix it right away, and therefore he argues in the Rambam. Okay, comes the Bes Yosef, and he answers, and he says, no, the Rambam holds lechatchila. You got to mix it very, very well. Okay. The Mari Ben Chaviv says, the Rambam didn't mean betchila v'ad soif. He meant tchila. Why did he say tchila v'ad soif? Because he was behemshich to using the word soif. He says, when is it osir? When do you need shishim against the whole chaticha? If you mixed it, when? In the end. But if you mixed it, he already said soif, so he just repeats the soif from beginning to end, but he didn't mean the word. It's also okay. So he makes a kvetch. But Ibn Chaviv says that really no one's arguing. Everybody agrees tchila is enough. The reason why the Rambam said soif is because he anyways had to mention soif, so he repeats the soif. Okay, the Mechaber brings that, the Bari Ben Chaviv, and he also brings the Rambam. He claiming that it means betchila v'ad soif. Which one does he really hold now, the Mechaber? Does he hold like the Bari Ben Chaviv, or does he hold like the Rambam Kipshutoi that you need tchila v'ad soif? What do you think? Which one?
Well, I don't. Unlike the Shach.
What do you think? Forget the Shach.
So I would say Mashmaus Bepashas that agrees with
Bari Ben Chaviv. I would say not, and I'll tell you why. I mean, you're rewriting the book. Write it in a way that we know what you're talking about. Why are you falling into a trap? Because the Rambam wrote something which created a problem. The Tur had to argue with him. I need Mari Ben Chaviv to come and kvetch. You're rewriting the book. Write it normal. If you didn't write it normal, that means you take a hold. You need betchila v'ad soif. So says the Shach. Tzvi disagrees. Maskim. But so says the Shach. The Shach LaHalocha doesn't care. Shach says, I'm asking to the Mari Ben Chaviv LaHalocha. The Ramah says it befeidish. Let's continue. The Ramah v'chein imnir betchila oikisa miyad. That's enough. He doesn't write via Shemrim because there is a kvetch in the Rambam also that it means that. That's why he doesn't write via Shemrim. But says the Shach, I'm telling you, I know. Rabbi Mechaber holds you need betchila v'ad soif. He writes it even befeidish on the Taz. Look at Taz Dalet. Go back to page Kuf Chof. The Mechaber says tchila v'ad soif. The Taz says lav davke. By the way, you should know lahalocha. It's not true. Ela benir miyad sagi. Nekudas hakesef beis loy nehirin dvarov. Not true. The Mechaber holds you actually need tchila v'ad soif. I disagree. I'm asking to the Taz, the halacha, but don't sell me boats what the Mechaber means. Was sagst du?
The Shach himself earlier said that Sotam over here, and I think it's Hadik Aleph, Sotam Kasamach that you read Beis Yosef. So based off that,
the Beis Yosef teaches the Rambam. You need tchila v'ad soif. He just says the Mari Ben Chaviv argues. Beis Yosef brings that story. He brings even on the Morok. He says you need near Kashem Yinaya Yofe Yofe. What are you saying?
He says if that's pshat in the Rambam, then
that's the beard. I got it. Okay.
Either he disagrees.
We don't know. We don't need to go in circles. I got what you're saying. Anyway. Nevertheless, the Shach claims that the Mechaber should have written a little more clear, after you know that it's controversial. Like, if you know something is controversial and you're rewriting the book, you write it in a clear way. So he wrote it in a clear way. He holds, he need tchila v'ad soif. Beautiful. Okay. But la'alocha, we all hold in tchila. So it comes out like this. So far, according to the Mechaber, Shach holds, the Mechaber holds, you need tchila v'ad soif. The Taz, Mari Ben Chaviv, they all hold tchila is enough. This is what the Taz writes here. In the end, Taz changes. It says, actually, the Rambam means tchila v'ad soif, but he means tchila. How does tchila v'ad soif mean tchila? Like, what does that mean? Because you thought soif means till it cools down. You know what soif really means? Till the tipa dissolves. Everybody holds you need that. Everybody holds when you say tchila, what does it mean? One mix and the tip is called sitting on a chatika? No, it means you mix it at soif havayas atipa. Until the tipa actually dissolves. So when the Rambam says tchila v'ad soif, he meant what everybody else holds tchila. It's just how you explain the word soif. The Rambam meant soif. Soif of Aisatipa. So instead of the Taz, what he said earlier, lav davke, but it's a different soif. Understood? Okay. Now, interesting. According to Mari Ben Chaviv, is the word soif real when he says tchila v'ad soif? No, he only wrote it because he wrote soif before. According to the Taz, is it real? Yeah, it just means something else. It just means soif havayis, but the word is real. Okay. If you remember, going back a few minutes, everybody attacked the Taz. How did you think that the Rambam was learning like Rashi? Because he says it automatically requires shishim. If the Rambam says and the Rambam says a minute later that you have to do nir. The answer is because the Taz learns that nir soif is lav davke. Since he had to say soif in the next part, he had to say soif. So the other soif is lav davke. The Mari Ben Chaviv learns that the first soif is dafke and the second one is lav dafke. The Taz learns lefech. Since the second soif is dafke, so as a hakdome, when he says it's osur, he already mentioned soif, but he included in that even if loy near klal. That's just a teretz for the Taz. How the Taz was able to think for a moment that the Rambam is Rashi and his Rashi. It says befeidish, you did near lebesoif. His mashma, if he did nothing, it's going to be mutter. The answer is the Taz holds that mamed varam amum shlanir betchila adal lebesoif. He meant to say he didn't mean betchila. Mamed varam shlanir betchila. That's the iker, regardless. El B'Soif is a hakdama to avolim near Metchila b'yad soif. It's also
Doesn't Rashi quote Marinun Chaviv and follow that? Doesn't he agree with
who?
that?
The Taz?
The Taz, I mean.
No, Maskani changes. In the middle of Vav, he changes. No. In the beginning, he holds a B'Chav. The Perli changes. Okay. This was just a Maimer Amuzga to explain the Taz. Now, comes the Pri Megadim, which a lot of you already touched upon. He touched upon it in the Chavaz Das. And Effie touched upon it Bechlal. You mentioned it. I have a Kabbalah from some guy who decided on Udin. So far, we have two Einon Bekims in our lives. Einon Bekim and how much salt, right? And Einon Bekim Mekachos L'Shamin. How many bubbles is bubbling, by the way? In Sif Aleph, when we said it, Basar falls into Chodov, it only makes a U-turn when it stops bubbling. How many bubbles? And it doesn't make a U-turn when, how many bubbles? One, you never see, you heat up water, it starts a little bubbles, and then a lot of bubbles, then it's really bubbling. How many bubbles? Stop. Could you answer the question? No. So you have to assume always l'chumra that it's bubbling and not bubbling. You don't know, right? Says the Taz, even if you're he agrees to Rashi. What if it's bubbling according to He's going to now take the Gemara of Sif Aleph with the Mishnah and we're going to fuse them together. Ri holds Tippas Chola falls on the Chaticha. That's B'Ktasa B'Techaretiv. How far does the Tippa go according to the Ri? To the bottom. Yeah, that's not if it's bubbling, right? If it's bubbling, what happens? It stays there for a second. It makes that Chaticha now Nevela. The minute it stops bubbling, now what do you need according to Ri Shishim against? The whole Chaticha. Just like Rashi according to the Taz. One second. Just like Rashi according to the Taz, right? Taz holds like Rashi. First the Chaticha becomes Asr, and then automatically you need Shishim against the Chaticha. The Ri would say the same thing if it indeed was bubbling when the Chola fell on, and then stop bubbling. What's your question?
Why does bubbling stop it from traveling?
Because that's what we learned to Sif Aleph. A Bliya doesn't come out when it's bubbling. You came a little late. Sif Aleph the Mechaber says so. That if it's Mala the Ticha, if it's bubbling, the Chola that goes in does not come out. Does not make a U-turn. Says this guy that Rav Echad, hello, I don't understand that he's really also moided to Rashi in a case that it was bubbling, right? Let's say it's Taka bubbling and then stop bubbling. What's the Riga to Paskin? Just like Rashi. Which Rashi, by the way? Taz is Rashi, right? That's what he's going to hold like. The K'ticha became Nevel, and a minute later when it stopped bubbling, automatically the Ri hold as part of the Tafshil. You need now Shishim against the whole Chaticha. Since we don't know how many bubbles is bubbles, so you always have to be machmir. That's what the Rav Echad decided. You think you're holding like the Ri? You have to hold like Rashi anyways. And not the Darkei Moshe. Even if you're the Shach, you have to hold like Rashi of the Taz. Even if you're the Darkei Moshe, in Shittas Rashi, the Rashi holds only the Chatichas also. Yeah, but if you're the Ri, and it was bubbling and then stopped bubbling, that's worse than Rashi. Worse than Rashi of the Darkei Moshe. Because according to the Darkei Moshe, no matter what, it never goes out of that Chaticha, only the Chaticha is also. But if you're the Ri and he holds that when it's Miktsasa, really the whole pot is one. But if it was bubbling, obviously it's not true. And then when it stops bubbling, and it's Shishim against the whole piece. So you think you're being Mekel like Ri, you better be Machmer like Rashi, says the Rav Echad. Lemaskona, the Pri Megadim is maskim to the Rav Echad. Although in Mishpat Zov he argues, but he was choizer in the Sif Seidas. Betaz Kosavnu, if you go back a page, he's choizer, and he actually holds like this Rav Echad. It's huge. It's huge stuff. I'll tell you, Bekitzer, what he attempted to argue outside, and why he was choizer. He asks a question. I don't understand. And let's say it's not bubbling. What does the Ri hold? What does the Ri hold? Tippas Chola falls on a Chaticha, that's Mitzvah B'Techaretiv. What does the Ri hold? Where does it go? So why doesn't it make the piece usher on the way? We don't know about Zap yet. If you don't know about Zap, what should be the din? The piece should become usher. So how does the Ri say it's all mitzvah? Probably the Ri holds it never goes in. That's why. Since it's b'ksosa b'techaretiv, the lachluchis and the hevel schleps the cholav sideways, that it never goes in. Probably that's the Ri's shitta. So the Rav Echad is wrong. It never goes in b'chlal according to the Ri. What's your problem? It was bubbling, it goes in, it doesn't go out. The Ri obviously holds it doesn't go in, because if it would go in, it would for sure make it nevela on the way, because we don't know Zap yet. We don't know derech hiluchay. So it must be the Ri holds it never comes in. Says the Pri Megadim, but I found out about Zap. Once I know Zap, it's not true. The Ri holds normally a befedish goes in, but why didn't he give time on the way? Because till it got to the bottom, it zapped and it never gave time. But if it's bubbling, there's no Zap, because it's bubbling. So therefore it's usher. What? The Pri Megadim.
Had it been outside of a pot, you would say we never say about the beshishim?
Outside completely? In one chaticha, you mean?
Not in a pot, on a table. I put a bunch of chicken on a table.
Of course not.
Never
Only in one
about
piece.
beshishim.
One piece, never two pieces, of course. 1 piece, yes. 2 pieces, no, never, of course. What's the question?
100 pieces.
No, of course not. Without reitiv? Of course not. Only 1 piece. It's not shaykh. What do you mean with reitiv? If it's not in a pot, there's no reitiv. It spills. What does that mean with reitiv? Has to be contained in 1 tafshil.
Okay, but you can have no hevel pot.
Doesn't mean hevel. You don't. Say that it only answer that piece anyway.
You have it on a tray.
Yes, it's only if a tray has walls. Not because of hevel. We're not doing this. This doesn't matter. You realize that, right? Okay. L'poel mamish, the primigodim is maskim to the Rav Echad. So this just creates major controversy. If we hold like the Rav Echad, it really doesn't matter to us. If we hold like the Ri or Rashi, like the Shach or the Taz, because even if you think you're holding like Ri, you have to end up paskening like Rashi or the Taz for a side reason. Because even if you're Ri, maybe it was bubbling, because we don't know how many bubbles, and then it stopped bubbling, so you need to against the whole thing. Chavis Das claims that the Rav Echad is so completely wrong. Even if it's bubbling, the Ri holds, it goes to the bottom, which is what Tzvi mentioned before. Chavis Das says that Gemara that says that when it's bubbling, it doesn't come out, was referring to tam that comes from the pot into the basar, making a U-turn. Anything that comes from outside, that klal doesn't apply. So if it comes from the outside, chol of falling, even if it's bubbling, it goes right through into the bubbles, into the rest of the pot. The Gemara says when it's bubbling, a blia doesn't come out. That's what it absorbed from the bubbles. Whatever absorbed from the bubbles, it can't give back out. But whatever it absorbed externally will come out. Go figure. Okay, that's what he holds. So according to the Chavis Das, no, if you're going to hold like the Ri, we hold completely like the Ri, even if it's bubbling. He doesn't care if we're bucky in bubbles or not bucky in bubbles, because it doesn't matter. Even if it's bubbling, the Chavis Das will go through. So now this just created more peklach on this whole shaila. So you have to know, do we paskin like Ri or Rashi? If you paskin like Rashi, which Rashi? The Darkei Moshe or the Taz? If you hold like the Ri, do we hold like the Rav Echad that it doesn't matter because it ends up being worse? Because we have to hold like Rashi, because even the Ri would hold like that if it's bubbling and then stop bubbling. And we don't know how many bubbles, so therefore you have to be machmer, like Rashi, Taz. Or do we hold like the Chavis Das? The Bechlal doesn't matter if it bubbles. If you're going to hold like the Ri, it's completely mutter. You follow? That's why this sugi is very, very complicated. Some achronim want to sign it like this, that if it's for sure bubbling, you should be machmer. But if it doesn't look like it's bubbling, you could rely on the shita of the shach that we hold like the Ri. The Alter Rebbe does seem, I have to find the lashon. If anyone, is there chelik gimel here? Is there chelik gimel hooks Pesach? Forgot to bring. I have to look it up again. I don't remember the lashon. At some point, I thought it's clear that he holds like the Ri. Then I realized it could be it's only the chumrah because on Pesach shishim doesn't work, so therefore everything is going to be aser. So I'm not exactly entirely sure. I don't remember now. I mean, I could look at it again. We'll be nether. But otherwise, it's not clear. So it's actually a fatwanter sugya, as they say. It's a complicated sugya. But we pretty much covered the first half of Sif base. The next year is going to be on the V'chein part. That's a whole sugya. Shlema, Segil, and Sivgala. We'll try to fuse Kam and Yonim into the same sugya. So there'll be Shiur Monday or Tuesday. Be'ezer Hashem Yisborach. You guys don't have vacation. You have to learn no matter what, because you're big boys. You're not here only learning because you're in yeshiva. You're learning because you want to actually learn and finish and get smicha. The other guys learning because the zman is goyim in a bacher who's in yeshiva, so if the zman is off, so you don't have to learn. But here it's the material is goyim. You all understand the difference? It's not the zman that's goyim. It's the material that's goyim. The choymer is goyim. If the choymer is goyim, it's a whole different ballgame. You all understand what I'm saying? Am I being clear enough? Or I have to titrate a bit clearer? I think you all understand. Have a wonderful Shabbos. May Rabbi say.